Hi, it's Rebecca Whitman, your host of the Balanced, Beautiful, and Abundant Show. I'm a top-rated life coach, an international best-selling author, and a multi-passionate entrepreneur. I'm on a mission to help you go from burned out to balanced, beautiful, and abundant. The experts on this show will help you achieve work-life balance so that you can experience abundance in 7 pillars of life: spirituality, health, emotions, romance, mindset, social, and financial life. When you have all 7 pillars of life in alignment, you are balanced, beautiful, and abundant. Let's go. Welcome, everyone, to the Balanced, Beautiful, and Abundant Show. I am your host, Rebecca Whitman, and we are taking you from burned out to balanced, beautiful, and abundant. Today, I have a very special guest. Welcome to the show, Dr. Heath.
Hey, thanks for having me. I'm glad to be here.
So great to have you here. Let me tell my audience a little bit about your background. So Doc Heath, as he's called on social media, coaches clients by helping them to identify schemas, which are ways of thinking that sabotage success in business, relationships, and life. He gives clients actionable techniques to restructure these schemas with success promoting programming. And I think this is incredible. We're definitely going to talk about that. I call them BS, or limiting belief systems. And he has been in private practice since 1993. He also has spent over a decade training first responders, military, and law enforcement on crisis and hostage negotiation techniques. I am fascinated by that. He holds a dual Ph.D. in neuropsychology and forensic psychology. Welcome to the show, Dr. Heath.
Yep, good to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
You are so welcome. So you have had a multi-decade career. I know we have a hard stop because you're going on a bike ride. So just in a brief synopsis, tell us your story. How did you get into psychology, and kind of how did you get to be doing what you're doing with your podcast and your game show, and kind of catch us up on your origin story a little bit?
I started undergrad school. I had no idea what I was going to do. I thought I was going to be at some point and this is in the early days of computing, a systems analyst that would go in and kind of Columbo figure out why a computer system's not working. But then my mentor at that college, we had to have a mentor. And my mentor was this long-bearded, flip-flop wearing throwback from the hippie days of the 70s. And I thought he was just the coolest dude ever. I thought, wow, he is so laid back and so chilled out. And I thought, where do you get that? Because my history was just kind of growing up in crisis, lose my mom at a young age. My dad being a single dad, just it seemed like constant crisis. And so I really enjoy the mechanics of how things work and how things are put together. And so I became acquainted with there's a way that the brain is put together. It works very much on a mechanistic system, kind of a integrated system where one area does one thing in one situation, and then in another situation, another part of the brain takes over. So long story short, I became a psych major. I became also, since Mike was a social work professor, a social work major, I added speech and I added religion and philosophy to make it a well-rounded quadruple major. And it took me 6 years. I finished it. And I guess from there decided I wanted to do a private practice. Wound up meeting my future business partner, Dominic Messino, who is the NYPD hostage negotiator. He had his own TV show for a while called Hostage Do or Die. And you can still look it up. It's Investigation Discovery, Hostage Do or Die. Dominic and I became business partners. Dominic passed away since, and we all miss him. He was the top in the world of hostage negotiation. And he and I went around the country with a team of people, teaching how to help people in crisis who may have other people with them. By the way, here's an insider tip. We would never call those people hostages because we want to humanize them in the mind of the person holding the gun or the bomb. And that's not a trick. It's just the way the brain works. And by the way, that's my first tip for relationships. What we have to do when we're in a difficult situation with another person is we have to see them as another person with their own needs, their own desires, their own motivations. One of my favorite quotes that I like to share with people in the military and law enforcement is from Marcus Aurelius, famous Roman philosopher king. And he would say, no one gets out of bed intending to be evil. They just don't. To them, in their eyes, what they're doing in that moment makes sense. So if you're going to be successful, you can't come at them like they're the problem and they're the crazy person and they're the one that's mixed up. You actually have to step into their reality and begin with understanding. That's one of the 7 habits of Stephen Covey in his book, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People.
Well, let me back up there. So, first of all, how did your mom die when you were at a young age?
Mom actually, I said I lost my mom, but mom actually didn't die. She was giving birth to my youngest sister, and a blood clot went from her leg to her heart and stopped her heart for about, I don't know exactly. I'm thinking it's 9 or 10 minutes, much too long. She had significant brain damage and spent the rest of her life in more or less a vegetative state in a long-term care facility. So I guess I lost my mom without really losing her. I lost her all but the burial. And so, my dad, he did what a great dad should do. And he raised his 3 kids, found another lovely lady who, I had my brother. And so there's 4 of us. And, so yeah, I wanted to, all the shrapnel, I guess I would say, that came from that made my brain fertile ground for some of those psychological concepts to take root, figure out how do people cope, how do they deal with trauma, and that's kind of what got me where I am.
Well, let's go into the title of this episode, which is How to Negotiate. What are some great negotiation techniques that we can do? I'm going to talk about business and romantic relationships. Let's start with romantic relationships first. If there's a conflict between a couple, what are some ways they can work their way out of it? Because I think one of the biggest deficiencies in communication is people do not learn conflict resolution. So if people can learn some great conflict resolution techniques on this episode today, I think that'll provide a great value.
Well, the first thing, and this is the same thing I would talk to police officers about, I would pull up on a scene and we would have an army of police officers. And there's one guy, and that's not always a guy, but usually it's a guy, one guy in an army of police officers. Well, that's too many. We don't need an army to take care of one guy. We need enough to make sure that everybody is safe. That's what we need. So, long story short, the first thing that we do is make sure that everybody's safe and reassure as a unit that we have enough in place for us to be safe. And that's one thing that in relationships people forget, and that is just because it's a tense situation doesn't mean you're not safe.
Mm-hmm.
Just because you don't prefer the situation doesn't mean that you are unsafe. We'll have officers and they're all hyped up, and charged up, and the adrenaline's flowing and everything, And the first thing that we would teach and do teach is let's take a breath. Now, this is the negotiation team on which we have a lead negotiator, we have a scribe, we have a float, we have a commander, and it's a whole team. So we remember to do self-care in the moment by giving our brains what it needs most, and that is oxygen, which then in turn allows us to calm down and allows a reset of our heart rate. By the way, here's a quick tip. If your heart rate gets above 95 to 100, you should take a break.
Yeah.
You're not going to have a useful conversation at that level. And by the way, we do the same thing. We tag in and out as a team. If this negotiator is not doing well, then we can tap out or tap them out and someone else takes over. As a couple, you can't do this, but you can call a timeout and say, I want to have this conversation. I really do. What you're saying is important to me. What if we take a 15, 20-minute break, or even make an appointment for tomorrow at 9:00? And we might say it's rare, but we might say something like that to the person in crisis. This is an important issue. I'm going to let so-and-so take over or whatever. And we may actually switch negotiators. But tip number one is remind yourself that you're not at risk. The presence of difficulty does not equal the presence of risk.
Yeah, it's what we're telling ourselves it is. And I think in modern society, we make things so scary and larger than life because our brain was wired to, run from the woolly mammoth and the saber-toothed tiger. But I don't think setting a boundary with someone or telling them, to pick up their dirty socks is the same thing as a saber-toothed tiger. But we don't, we get scared. So yes, and if you're listening, obviously you're not going to be able to take your blood pressure. But when you feel your heart beating fast and you feel that anger starting to boil up, Dr. Heath is saying to take space. Okay, so what is the next step?
Often, since you mentioned anger, often emotions get a bad rap. And I'll have, to this day, judges refer people over to me for, quote, I'm doing air quotes here, anger management. And we're very clear with the court. We don't manage anger because it's like this. If your house was burning and the service people showed up in a big fancy truck and these SpaceX floating things came out and start sucking up all the smoke, you might be fascinated. Wow, what's Elon Musk going to come up with next? He's got these environmental cleaning vacuum cleaners that like hovercraft that float around. But then you may notice that your house continues to burn. My question to folks is this. Do you want to get rid of the smoke or put out the fire?
Put out the fire.
And those are our thought processes. If I am, as my favorite psychologist long years past now, Albert Ellis would say, awfulizing, or as Aaron Beck would say, who's recently passed away a couple years ago, would call it catastrophizing, then that's going to create more of the smoke of emotion, which is necessary. However, in the presence of anger, I can still do the healthy thing. I can be angry and healthy simultaneously. I don't got to get rid of the anger to be healthy. I can be both at the same time. It's really about what is the most effective behavior, healthy behavior. And what does that come from? Our thought processes. What we do on a crisis scene is we take as much time as needed. And yes, we have officers get in a hurry. which I typically ask them, "What are you not getting paid overtime? Do you have a hot date? I mean, where you got to go?" Let's not risk someone's life or risk a relationship because of a stopwatch. So get rid of your stopwatch and take time, take breathers, take breaths, take breaks, and that kind of thing. But we're here to hear the other person's side of the story. And since you mentioned my bike ride, I have an analogy there. If you guys were going to meet me here out front, we're leaving in about 40 minutes, by the way, and we're going to do a 10K bike ride. And I want to ride in tandem with you. Do you need to speed up or do I need to slow down? Well, now you may be a better biker than me, which would mean that you need to speed up. But I do this every day. I do a 10K bike ride every day, and I may outrun you, and so I may need to slow down. So what my point is, the one that is the healthiest in the situation often sets the pace by slowing down to the speed of the other person. And what that means in a hostage situation is the person on the other side of the door in a barricade situation, I don't have to be into or agree with everything they say. I'm not trying to get them to agree with me. We had a person one time that said, "I'm not coming out until you bring Pablo Escobar right here." Well, gosh, Pablo Escobar.
Was he either crazy or working for Pablo?
Well, I wouldn't say either. He was in a difficult situation, and the problem was I'm a psychology guy. I am not a medium, and Pablo at the time was dead. So I can't channel him here. So I don't recall exactly what I said. Something like, I'll do the best I can. And we took a break, consulted with the team, and then I said, I don't know. This was a surprise to me too, and I regret to inform you. Pablo has left the building. He won't be back. What else can we do? So we don't lie to people. We don't make stuff up. And if we can't do it, we just say we can't do it. But the point is, the problem in relationships is people are treating that interaction like Burger King. I'm at Burger King and I need to have it my way. Well,
right.
Now wait a minute. Yeah.
If two people want to have it their way, that's what a fight is. So how do we de-escalate a fight? Both people want to be right. Both people want to get their way. You're saying the person
it takes a lateral approach that neither may have thought about. At the end of the day, in a relationship, well, in a crisis situation, a hostage situation, it comes down to safety. Right. We want you to be okay. And just one more quick thing there is I run into officers, and they still do. You hear it all over the news. They talk about this is the bad guy. And the person in crisis is often referred to as the bad guy. What about this is maybe a person other people love, care for, that has a mom or dad, a sister, brother, son or daughter, cousins, whoever, and they're having a difficult day and they make some poor choices, but they're still a human being. So in the relationship, here's some neuroscience for you guys. We all have an area of our brain that deals with disgust. It is there engineered to keep you from eating things, drinking spoiled milk or, eating moldy bread or something like that might make you sick. And you have a disgust response. I also call it the disgust cortex, or the divorce attorney's best friend, the divorce cortex.
Yeah.
And we can light up that part of the brain called the instant cortex toward other people. So if you're a police officer, calling that person the bad guy is going to sabotage that conversation. In a relationship disagreement, telling that person you're manipulating me or you're a manipulator is going to sabotage your ability to be effective. Calling them a gaslighter is going to sabotage your ability to engage, because what you're telling yourself is, without knowing it, is they're a threat to me. Well, that brings us back to the first technique there, is look at the situation and make sure that you are safe. Now, if that person has a weapon, well, that's not a good idea. I had a patient show up at my front door office one time and court ordered and said, "Man, I dreamed I stuck a effing axe in your head last night."
Well,
And
I
I
hope you
looked
got
down.
rid of them.
No, I didn't. I looked down at his hands to see if he had an axe. He didn't have an axe, nor did he have another weapon. To which I said, never bring an axe to therapy. It won't work out well. But if you're not armed, come on in and let's do what the court ordered us to do. Don't leave your axe at home, though. So
This is an
not,
axe-free zone.
I love that. I should get a sign. So as long I like to look around and make sure I'm very threat aware. I have good situational awareness. And just because you're upset with me doesn't make you a threat to me.
Yeah.
I mean,
it's about not responding, not reacting to the other person, which is like not being codependent. Like somebody can be upset and angry at me or the other person, and it doesn't mean that I have to react, but that is some ninja shit.
oh, that's tough.
To
Oh,
not
really, really
react when
tough.
somebody's coming at you, they're name calling, they're yelling, they're so angry, and to stay stoic and calm, that takes a lot of self-awareness.
I don't think that you. I mean, it depends on what you call calm. I get fairly ramped up sometimes, and I've been on calls and I've told people I'm very nervous.
Mm-hmm.
Why am I nervous? I'm nervous because I want to do a good job for you. I'm nervous because I want you to be safe. I'm nervous because I believe that you're at risk and you have a family that also wants you to be safe. See, I don't have to deny or get rid of my emotions, and I don't have to have a flat face or lack of an affect. I don't have to be, as it's called, an anhedonic, without emotions. But I can think about this. We will look at other people and think if their face is red, if they're moving, agitated physically, that we're at risk. And you'll actually have people say, calm down. Now, I have a question for the calm downers that use that, which I never do, by the way. How well would it work if someone told you that? Can you do that? If you're really hyped up,
No.
and you're all agitated and somebody doesn't want you to be, all they have to do is say the magic words, calm down, and you're going to say, oh, thank you. That's all I needed. If someone would have told me to calm down 5 minutes ago, I would have calmed down 5 minutes ago. I tell police officers that never works. But they will pull up on a scene, roll up on a scene, as they say, and say, ma'am, calm down. Like, what is that? Open sesame, abracadabra? How are they going to do that? If you come here and you are agitated, as long as you don't have an axe and you're not throwing stuff, because if you come here and you break stuff, I'll bill you for it.
Yeah.
So don't break my stuff. I'm good to go. As long as you're not a threat to yourself or a threat to me or my property, you can pace, walk around, all that kind of thing, and we're good to go. And so I'm just about the relationship.
What is a magic question that if a couple's having a fight, they could actually say to show, because you're saying showing empathy, compassion, not name calling. What would be a nice way to de-escalate a fight between a couple?
From my side of it, I've been in my relationship with my wife for 40 years as of this June. And
Congratulations.
thank you. And we use this all the time. And we actually used it last night.
Oh,
We sat by the pool, watched the harvest moon, and we hadn't had time to connect all week. She's really busy. I'm really busy. We'd had a few tips about first one thing, then another. She's under a lot of pressure from her work, and her dad is ill and everything. And so we connected and just shared our perspectives. And that's really one of the biggest steps in a relationship with a couple. And because I don't know how food tastes in her mouth, she has to tell me.
right.
And she doesn't know how food tastes in my mouth. I have to tell her. Let's not assume how a statement tastes in another person's brain. Ask them. They may hear it differently than you. And so I recommend using when blank, event, situation, circumstance. When you do this or when you don't do that, I get to thinking. See, I'm taking responsibility for what I'm thinking. I get to thinking that you think I'm a dodo bird or something, whatever. And she's told me before, you're the smartest ignorant person I have ever met.
There you go.
When this happens, I get to thinking this. So now she knows what's going on inside the vault of my skull, and I get to feeling angry, sad, disgusted.
Right.
And what she does is not respond to the emotion. That's like the smoke, but to respond to the fire, which is my thought process, which she will say something like, I'm really sorry that you think that. That was not my intent. I mean, it's not this strict and cold and clinical when we're talking, of course. I'm trying to be very precise. But and we had a conversation about her thoughts last night and my thoughts last night and my perceptions and her perceptions and all that kind of thing. And we do that even if we're not steeped in conflict. It's just something, I think this, oh, well, I thought that, oh, well, I thought this, because no one can mind read. I've had a few psychics as patients, by the way, and they've all said it's a trick. And I can't read minds, but I make good money doing it, though I can't do it. And so if I want to know what's inside the vault of my wife's skull, I have to ask her.
Yeah, you have
Take
to
time to do it.
ask someone. I had a therapist that said women, if you're in your feminine, women want to be asked, how are you feeling? Men want to be asked, what are you thinking? And ask those questions. I like what you said about the fire. The fire is the thoughts and the smoke is the emotions. And get down to the root causes. Like, what are you thinking about this? Which is great advice. Now, let's talk about limiting beliefs. I know you talk about in your bio schemas, which are limiting belief systems that are no longer serving your patients. What are some of your techniques that you give your patients to overcome their limiting beliefs?
I like to dig into, we kind of do a top-down process because schemas are really hard. I'll take a really obvious thing. I do a lot of work with relationships where there's been affairs. And what's the number one question that the injured spouse has when their spouse has an affair? Why?
Yes.
Why did he do it? I mean, it's not always he, by the way. I have, just not as many, but I have plenty of women who do the same thing. It's not restricted to one gender or the other. And a little news alert that a lot of your listeners may not believe. I've done this for a long, long time. I've been in mental health since the mid 80s, and I've had a private practice since 93. I've only had maybe 2 cases where somebody actually knew why they had an affair. They simply don't know. Well, that's the schema we're talking about. There's some schema there to dig down to. And the thing about it, when we get down to it, it's nowhere near what the injured spouse thinks that it was, because inevitably they'll personalize it. They had an affair because I'm not handsome or pretty enough or whatever, or sexually whatever, or I don't know whatever. I can't swing from the chandeliers or from the ceiling fan or whatever, but that's never it. That's never it. I've had some really strange cases where someone pinpointed it and said I did it for this reason, to get back at them. Well,
that makes sense, because some of the most beautiful people in the world get cheated on, like movie stars and rock stars, and the most talented, smart, beautiful, desirable people in the world get cheated on. So if you're listening to this and you've been cheated on, or you're being cheated on, don't take it personally. It's never about you. It's about the other person's schema. So how do we overcome these limiting schemas? Give us some actionable advice. I know a lot of
we start at the top-down process, as I said, and that is learning to pinpoint what we think about a given situation. It could be anything. Yeah. It could be what you're thinking about sitting at a traffic light, what you're doing, or what you're thinking about. Well, I'm going to confront about 6 hills. They're, for me, pretty steep hills on my bike ride. What am I going to decide to think about those? What are you going to decide to think about your, spouse seeming not to register when you said, hey, look at this new pair of pants I have, or look at this new top, or whatever I have. What are you going to decide to think about that? Reality always starts inside of my brain, and I project it onto reality. So we get people that are really good at doing that. Then we can begin connecting the dots to how did you come to think that way? Where did that come from? Everything comes from somewhere. And here's something to kind of canoodle the noodle of your listeners. There is no unconscious, I'm touching my forehead here, unconscious process that didn't first begin as a conscious process. It had to get in there some way, somehow, and you may not know what that is, but we can kind of track it back. And I have people say, I grew up believing this is the way life worked. I'll take a very, really seemingly tragic, strange one, and that I've seen more often than you might imagine, and that is mother-daughter sexual abuse.
That's dark.
Where mothers, and I've had patients say, I went to the police and they laughed at me and said a mother would never do that. Well, yeah, they do. It's not talked about because it's, icky and everything. And there's all kinds of cognitive distortions about that being possible, and the whole sacred, status that motherhood has and should. But I've had patients that came to me thinking, and that wasn't even the identified problem. They actually did not come for that. And then it came up. Now, it's not through hypnosis. It's not through recovered memories. It came up like, hey, by the way, we grew up gardening squash.
Mm-hmm.
Said just like that. But it was, I grew up with mother fondling my genitals. And hey, by the way, let's get back on topic kind of thing. And I said, whoa, what? Because their schema is that was normal.
Oh, yeah. Wow. Yeah, that's heavy. So other than going back to the wound and processing it with a therapist, which is invaluable, that's why your career is so long-term and people are coming to you from all over the world. But if there's someone listening here who has a limiting belief, that's a lot more simple. Like, let's say it's, I'll never meet my soulmate. All the good ones are taken. I'm always going to be alone. Is there any actionable advice that you could give someone who thinks a limiting belief such as that?
Sure. You can tackle it from both ends of the equation. You can do bottom up or top down. I would guess probably you went through school. You went through your childhood believing that you were undeserving. You found yourself left out of being the last one picked on the volleyball team or the dodgeball team. You just developed a whole pattern of being last place, last place, last place. And at this point, your brain is over assimilating. All future experiences will be just like that. This is how my future will be. That's called fortune telling. And others look at me the same way that, I don't know, the popular kids looked at me in school. That's called mind reading. So it's really the unholy trinity of cognitive distortions. It's catastrophizing, mind reading, fortune telling. And I would recommend counteracting that with some evidence. And what might that evidence be? Well, I mean, if you have a job, then somebody hired you. If you have a friend, then somebody chose you. And there, look at your purpose on the planet, what you do, the difference you make, and realize that you may be and probably are limiting yourself, because in life you really wind up getting over time what you expect. And there's all kinds of research about that. One is the Rosenthal famous experiment where he got a group of children and tested them with this Cadillac assessment. And then he shared with the teachers that this group of children were the ones that were gifted and talented. And this group of children were kind of the dunces of the class with behavior problems. Well, they thought he was a prophet, because that's exactly what they found in these kids. As the old radio announcer Paul Harvey would say, but the rest of the story is that Rosenthal took those assessments back home to his office and threw them in the trash. He never even looked at them. He randomly selected students from a pool of students who all tested equally. The only difference was how the teachers chose to look at them. And whether, as the great Henry Ford said, whether you think you can or think you cannot, you are correct. I'll give you a technique that one of my favorite psychologists, I mentioned him earlier, Albert Ellis, used. He said that he's, by the way, the father of rational emotive behavioral therapy under the umbrella of cognitive therapy. He challenged himself, this shy, kind of runty Jewish young man, to go to Central Park and talk to 100 women. He went to the park. He kept his word to himself. So there's a tip. Make a commitment to yourself and keep your commitment.
Yes.
Your job is not the outcome. Your job is keeping the commitment. Now, Ellis called these ordeals. And he went to Central Park. He talked to 100 women. I believe, as the story goes, he only got a date with one. And that one stood him up. Maybe that's kind of a fable, but I believe that's the story he used to tell it. He's got some great books that's out on Amazon, and he's long since passed, but a great read. How to Absolutely Positively Never Again Make Yourself Miserable About Anything, I think is the title of one of the books. But the point is, after that, his life changed, because he was never again limited by these fenced-in beliefs. And so that's a tip I would have in relationships. Stop focusing on how much you can't, and remove the apostrophe T, and realize how much you can and how much you're capable of. And if you have two people that believe that, then well, they can accomplish anything. There's a thing on social media. What's the number one reason why people get a divorce? No one got it.
What is it?
They decide to get a divorce.
Yeah.
That's it.
I know a couple that's been married a long time, like you and your wife, and I asked them the secret, and they said they're in the no matter what club, that we're just going to stay married no matter what.
I love that. Us too. I recommend taking all the exit signs out of your relationship.
Yeah.
The only reason people, and I don't want to step on anybody's toes, and if you believe this, well, good for you, whatever works. But the only reason that people believe that or that they've been kidnapped by UFOs is they've heard of it.
Mm-hmm.
They've heard of UFOs. And if they had never heard of it, it would be an option to believe. The reason people get divorced or they even look at it as an option is they've heard of it. So it becomes kind of a safety thing, their go-to. If my marriage or relationship's not like Burger King, I'm taking the exit, taking the off-ramp. Well, why would you make that an option? I ask people, do you go to Walmart? We have lots of Walmarts around here. They say yes. Well, how often do you shoplift? Oh, I never shoplift. Well, why not? It's cheaper. I mean, if you're sneaky, you can save lots of money. Look around, make sure there's no cameras, Why don't you shoplift? I ask. As a young juvenile delinquent, I was a big shoplifter. I was really good at it too. It's a good thing I went to college. Well, they don't wait. And since we're running out of time, I'll leave this as my last tip. They don't wait to get to Walmart and then decide, now, gosh, do I shoplift? Do I not shoplift? No, they've already decided in advance they're not a thief. So that option is not even on the table. In a relationship, decide in advance of the issue what you're not going to do. We're just not quitters. We just don't have escape signs.
And you could say the same thing about cheating or lying or abuse or anything. We
decide our character, and then our character decides our behavior.
Yes.
And I'm just, my wife knows that I will be here, literally until they drag my body away. She'll say, the first thing I'm going to do is hire a dumpster to get rid of all the junk around here. And I'll kid with her. I'll say, let me guess what the first thing that'll be in the dumpster. They'll say, well, hey, where's Heath? I don't know. I think we might have put him in the dumpster first, but we joke around like that. But no, just decide what's on the table, what's not on the table. And believe you me, having divorce on the table in a relationship is like having termites in the walls of your home. It will eat away at it, eat away at it, eat away at it. Make it not an option. I mean, make those other things not an option too, by the way.
Yeah. Well, tell us a little bit before we wrap up the interview about your game show. It's a Jeopardy style psychology show. Tell us where we can find that and why that game show exists.
I like Jeopardy. I found that there's a lot of misinformation about psychology on social media. And so we put the two together, and it's just to educate people on sometimes hard to understand psychological concepts. So it's called The Question in Question. And I give the answer, and then the audience comes up with the question, and we give away prizes that can be redeemed for merchandise in our store.
I love it. That is so fun. Where can people find this? The question is the question. What is it called?
The question in question.
The question in question. Where can they find that show?
The question is on YouTube, Therapy Bites. Just go to YouTube, Therapy Bites. Also on Twitter, we stream live, and that's at @therapy_bites. And love to have you join in. I do a Friday and Saturday morning executive espresso caffeinated conversation with Dr. Heath on the same platforms. It also streams through Facebook, Therapy Bites Podcast, and love to have any of you along. And you can win some, we call them Psycoins, PCs, to redeem for merchandise.
And I was on that show, right?
Executive Espresso. Rebecca was a great guest on Executive Espresso. We had lots of fun. That's how I showed up on this one. You said, hey, I did yours. You got to come do mine.
Yep, we had such a good conversation. We continued it. And how can people stay in touch with you and keep getting your amazing wisdom?
Well, thanks. I think you're going to put in the show notes a link to sign up for a free newsletter. We're not asking for money or anything. We just like to share out psychological and nutritious information. So it's a free newsletter. You can sign up.
Thank you so much, Doc Heath. I appreciate you being on the show. I know you got a bike to ride and some hills to climb. My name is Rebecca Whitman. I am your host of the Balanced, Beautiful, and Abundant Show. We are taking you from burned out, overwhelmed, and exhausted to balanced, beautiful, and abundant. We would so appreciate it if you share this show with a friend. And if you have an extra 30 seconds in your busy day, if you could find the time to give us a 5-star review and subscribe, that would mean the world to me. And more people would learn about how to go from burned out to balanced, beautiful, and abundant. Until we see each other again next week, keep your vibe high and magnetize. Hey guys, if you're struggling with online dating and just sick and tired of swiping right, if you're just not meeting the right people, or maybe you're lonely and dreading going through another holiday season single, then I have great news. I am opening my Manifest Your Soulmate 8-week class for enrollment so you can find your life partner before the holidays. Just go to the Linktree link in the show notes to schedule your Manifest Love call to learn more, and I can't wait to learn more about how I can help you find your true love for once and for all. If I can do it, I know I can help you.